the Scourge of God, separating myth from man. History remembers a name whispered in fear, echoed through the marble halls of Rome, echoed in Constantinople, a name synonymous with destruction, Attila the Hun. They called him the Scourge of God, a divine punishment sent to shatter a complacent world. Legends paint him as a monstrous figure, a barbarian king whose armies were a tide of devastation, leaving only fire and ruin in their wake. They say his horse's hooves left the grass barren, a relentless warrior, pure unbridled fury, lived only for conquest and the lamentations of his enemies, the ultimate outsider, the great terror from the east. But beyond these terrifying legends, who was the real Attila? Was he truly the inhuman monster? Or a different man behind the fearsome reputation? A skilled and pragmatic ruler? A military genius? A leader who used shrewd diplomacy and iron will? The line between myth and man is blurred. The truth is far more complex than a caricature. We are told he was short, with a broad chest and a large head. His eyes small and deep-set, his nose flat, his complexion swarthy. This portrait comes from Jordanes, the only physical description we have. It was designed to make him appear alien. Yet he commanded the loyalty of countless tribes, the Huns, the Goths, the Alans. He met with Roman ambassadors, entertained envoys in his great wooden palace, negotiated treaties that humbled empires, a statesman as much as a warrior. This journey will take us across the windswept steppes of Eurasia, into the heart of a crumbling Roman world. We will follow the path of the Huns as they emerged on Europe's edges. We will sift through fragments of evidence, separating tales from record. We will not just recount battles and bloodshed. We will search for the man himself. Join us as we seek to understand Attila the Hun, the warrior who terrified Rome and whose legacy is etched in fear and memory. A shadow on the steppes, in search of Attila's origins. To find the man, we must first look to the world that made him. The story of Attila does not begin in a palace of stone, but somewhere on the vast, unending grasslands of the Eurasian steppes. The precise location of his birth, around the year 406, remains one of history's great unknowns. No birth certificate was issued, no monument was raised. His origins are shrouded in the mists of time, recorded not by his own people, who possessed no written language, but by the Romans who would later become his greatest adversaries. These accounts are often hostile, incomplete, and woven with the threads of fear and propaganda, making a clear picture incredibly difficult to assemble. The Huns themselves were a nomadic confederation of tribes, a people defined by movement. Their lives were lived on horseback, their wealth measured in herds, and their society bound by fierce clan loyalties. This was a world far removed from the settled, agricultural life of the Roman Empire. For a young Hunnic boy, life would have been a relentless education in survival. From an early age, he would have learned to ride almost before he could walk. He would have mastered the powerful composite bow, the iconic weapon of the Huns, becoming an expert horse archer capable of unleashing storms of arrows while galloping at full speed. This was the crucible that forged their warriors. Our knowledge of Attila's early life is almost entirely a void, a shadow filled only by speculation and the oral traditions that came much later. We know he had an older brother, Bleda. Together, they would inherit the Hunnic throne from their uncle, Rugila, who had already established the Huns as a significant threat to the Eastern Roman Empire. The tradition of co-rule was common among nomadic peoples, a way to manage a sprawling and often fractious confederation. When Attila first steps onto the stage of recorded history, it is as a diplomat and a commander, negotiating treaties with the emissaries of Constantinople. We are about to embark on a journey across battlefields littered with the debris of fallen empires, into the smoky halls of royal palaces, and through the treacherous landscape of broken treaties and shifting allegiances. It is a story of ambition, power, and the collision of two vastly different worlds. The Romans saw a barbarian at the gates, an existential threat to their very civilization. The Huns saw a world ripe for the taking, a source of immense wealth, and a stage upon which to build their own dominion. To truly understand the saga that follows, we must prepare to meet Attila not as a legend, but as a man of his time, shaped by the harsh realities of the steppes and driven by a vision we are only now beginning to comprehend. The brothers' throne, Attila's ascent to power. Attila did not emerge from the shadows alone. The path to absolute power began with a shared throne. Around 434, leadership passed to Attila and his elder brother Bleda. They inherited power from their uncle Rugila. Rugila had already shown Rome how dangerous the Huns could be. He extorted huge sums of gold from the Eastern Empire. He'd laid the groundwork. The Huns were now major power brokers on Rome's fringes. The brothers held the reins of a formidable war machine. Dual kingship helped manage a vast, unruly confederation. Bleda likely had seniority, but Roman sources call Attila the driving force. In 435, they negotiated the Treaty of Margus. Roman envoys were forced to meet the Hunnic kings on horseback. The treaty's terms were humiliating. Tribute doubled to 700 pounds of gold. Roman markets opened to Hunnic traders. Romans agreed to return all Hunnic fugitives. Attila showed early a grasp of power. The threat of invasion was sometimes more valuable than invasion. For nearly a decade, the brothers ruled. Their authority covered many peoples, Germanic groups, Alanic peoples. They dominated the lands north of the Danube, but a shared throne can be fragile. Tensions between brothers, a sudden quarrel, a palace coup, a slowly brewing rivalry that boiled over. Around 445, Bleda disappears from records. Ancient chroniclers say Attila had him killed. The dual kingship ended. Attila stood alone, sole ruler of the Huns. The most dangerous man in the world answered to no one. A king in his own right, consolidating an empire. With Bleda gone, Attila's ambition was finally unleashed. He was now the absolute master of a vast multi-ethnic empire, Ural Mountains, Rhine River. His first order of business was to consolidate his power, every tribe, every chieftain, not just through fear, but also through a shrewd distribution of wealth. The gold that flowed from the Roman Empire was the glue that held his confederation together. Reward loyal commanders, equip his armies, display the immense power and prestige of his court. His gaze quickly turned back to his favorite target, the wealthy but vulnerable Eastern Roman Empire. The Treaty of Margus was a mere starting point. Attila found a pretext to break the peace, accusing the Romans of desecrating Hunnic royal tombs. In 447, he launched a massive invasion of the Balkans. This was no mere raid. It was a full-scale campaign of conquest and destruction. Hunnic armies swept through the Roman provinces, sacking over 70 cities, burning over 70 cities, including major centers like Nisus, the birthplace of Emperor Constantine the Great. The Roman field army was shattered. Attila's forces rode unopposed to the very walls of Constantinople itself. Theodosian walls were too strong for Attila's army, which lacked sophisticated siege technology. He did not need to take the city to achieve his goal. The devastation of its provinces was enough. Emperor Theodosius II was forced to sue for peace under humiliating terms. The annual tribute was tripled to £2,100 of gold. An additional £6,000 demanded immediately as arrears. A vast swathe of Roman territory south of the Danube was ceded to the Huns. A desolate no-man's land was created. Attila had effectively bankrupted the Eastern Empire, turning it into a tributary state. This victory cemented Attila's reputation as an unstoppable force. He was not just a barbarian chieftain. He was a strategic genius who exploited Roman weaknesses with terrifying precision. He mastered the art of psychological warfare, using terror as a weapon to break his enemy's will, sending embassies, receiving embassies, negotiating complex treaties, all while holding the sword of annihilation over his counterparts' heads. Attila the Hun was no longer just a threat on the frontier. He was the most powerful ruler in Europe, and he was just getting started. Terror in the West, the invasion of Gaul. Having thoroughly subjugated and humiliated the Eastern Empire, Attila's gaze shifted westward. The Western Roman Empire was a fractured and politically unstable entity, a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. As was his custom, Attila manufactured a brilliant pretext for his invasion. He declared his intention to marry Honoria, the sister of the Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III. Years earlier, Honoria had sent her ring to Attila in a desperate bid to escape an arranged marriage, an act he cynically chose to interpret as a proposal. He now demanded Honoria as his bride and half of the Western Roman Empire as her dowry. When Valentinian predictably refused this outrageous demand, Attila had his cause for war. In the spring of 451, he assembled one of the largest armies of the ancient world. It was a terrifying coalition of peoples. His own Hunnic horsemen formed the core, supported by a vast array of subjugated Germanic tribes: Ostrogoths, Gepids, Alans. This immense host crossed the Rhine River and poured into Gaul, modern-day France. Their advance was a trail of fire and terror. Cities like Metz were razed to the ground, their inhabitants massacred. Panic seized the province as tales of the Huns' ferocity spread, painting them as demonic destroyers sent to punish the world. The primary target of the invasion was the strategically important city of Aurelianum, now Orléans. Its capture would give Attila a vital bridgehead across the Loire River, opening the path to the rest of Gaul. As the Huns laid siege to the city, the fate of the West hung in the balance, but Rome was not without its defenders. The supreme commander of the Western Roman armies was Flavius Aetius, a brilliant general who was perhaps the only man alive who truly understood the Huns. Aetius had spent time as a hostage among them in his youth. He knew their language, he knew their tactics, he knew Attila himself. He understood that Rome could not face this threat alone. Aetius embarked on a frantic diplomatic mission, racing to build a coalition to counter Attila's horde. His greatest challenge was persuading the powerful Visigothic kingdom, led by their aging king Theodoric I, to join him. The Goths and Romans were traditional enemies, but Aetius convinced Theodoric that Attila was a threat to all peoples of Gaul, not just the Romans. In a remarkable feat of statesmanship, he forged an uneasy alliance between Roman legions and Visigothic warriors. This combined force marched to relieve Aurelianum, arriving just as the city was about to fall. Outmaneuvered, Attila was forced to withdraw and seek favorable ground for a decisive battle. The stage was set for a monumental confrontation. Attila withdrew from Orléans, seeking a place for his cavalry to operate at its full devastating potential. He found it on the vast open expanse of the Catalonian plains near the modern city of Châlons-en-Champagne. It was here, in late June of 451, that the fate of Western Europe would be decided. On one side stood Attila, Huns, vassal peoples. On the other stood Aetius, Romans, Visigoths, Franks, Burgundians. The sheer scale of the armies assembled was almost unprecedented, a true clash of civilizations. The battle began with a ferocious struggle for a ridge that dominated the battlefield. Aetius and his Visigothic allies managed to seize this high ground first, a crucial early advantage that disrupted Attila's plan. From this commanding position, the Roman Gothic forces could look down upon the Hunnic lines. Attila, sensing wavering morale, rode among them, delivering a fiery speech to steel their resolve. He placed himself at the center with his elite Hunnic horsemen, preparing to lead a massive charge aimed at shattering the enemy line. The ensuing conflict was a maelstrom of unimaginable violence. Jordanes described a river running red with blood, choked with the bodies of the fallen. In the center, Attila's Huns crashed into the lines of the Alans, who had been deliberately placed there by Aetius as the least reliable of his allies. While the Huns tore through the Alan ranks, their charge was blunted. On the flanks, the battle raged with equal ferocity. In the chaos, the Visigothic king Theodoric was thrown from his horse and trampled to death by his own charging warriors. His death did not break his men, it enraged them. Led by Theodoric's son Thorismund, the Visigoths launched a furious counterattack, driving back the Ostrogoths fighting for Attila. As dusk fell, Attila's central charge had stalled, his flanks were collapsing. He was forced to retreat to his camp, a laager of wagons arranged in a circle. There he prepared for a final stand, building a funeral pyre from wooden saddles, ready to throw himself into the flames rather than be captured. But Aetius chose not to press the attack, fearing that destroying the Huns would leave the Visigoths too powerful. he allowed Attila's battered army to slip away under cover of darkness. The battle was technically a draw, but Attila's aura of invincibility had been shattered. Defeated in Gaul but far from finished, Attila returned to his lands to lick his wounds and plan his revenge. The following year, in 452, he turned his attention to the heartland of the Western Empire, Italy itself. The pretext of his marriage to Honoria was renewed, and his army, replenished and re-equipped, descended from the Alps into the plains of northern Italy. This time, there was no Aetius with a grand coalition to stop him. The Italian peninsula was left terrifyingly exposed. The invasion began with the siege of Aquileia, a large and wealthy city that guarded the entrance to Italy. The city resisted fiercely, but it eventually fell and was so utterly destroyed that generations later it was difficult to find where it had even stood. The fall of Aquileia sent a wave of terror across Italy. Other major cities in the north, including Mediolanum and Ticinum, were sacked and plundered. Refugees fled in panic, some seeking shelter in the marshy lagoons of the Adriatic coast, laying the foundations for what would one day become the city of Venice. Attila's path of destruction seemed unstoppable as he marched southward, his sights apparently set on the ultimate prize, the city of Rome itself. The Emperor Valentinian III fled from his court in Ravenna to the safety of Rome, but the city's defenses were weak and its people were gripped by fear and famine. A military response seemed impossible. It was at this desperate moment that one of the most famous and mysterious encounters in history took place. As Attila's army camped near the Mincio River, a Roman embassy traveled from Rome to meet him. It was led not by the emperor or a general, but by Pope Leo I. Alongside him were two high-ranking senators. The exact details of their conversation are unknown, lost to legend. Later, Christian accounts claim that the Pope, filled with divine authority, pleaded with Attila to spare the holy city. They tell a story of the apostles Peter and Paul appearing in the sky behind Leo, brandishing swords and terrifying the Hun into submission. The historical reality was likely more pragmatic. Attila's army was already suffering from disease and a shortage of supplies in the unfamiliar Italian climate. His lines of communication were stretched thin, and he knew that Roman forces were beginning to regroup and harass his rear. Furthermore, a large army from the Eastern Roman Empire had crossed the Danube, threatening the Hunnic homelands. The treasure of Rome, a vast payment of gold offered by the embassy, was almost certainly the deciding factor. For a combination of very practical reasons, Attila accepted the deal. He turned his army around and marched back out of Italy, leaving the ancient capital untouched. The Scourge of God had been turned away, not by a legion but by a priest and a pile of gold. The end for the most feared man in the world came not on the battlefield, but in his own bed. In 453, shortly after marrying a Gothic bride named Ildico, Attila died. The circumstances of his death are murky and debated. Priscus reports a severe nosebleed in his sleep, and drunken on his back, he choked on his own blood. Other theories: assassinated by his new wife, a plot by his enemies, a pre-existing medical condition, possibly esophageal varices from heavy drinking. We will likely never know for certain. The sudden, almost mundane death of the Scourge of God was a quiet, anticlimactic end to a life like a thunderclap. His empire unraveled almost immediately. Attila's personal loyalties did not transfer to his sons, who quarreled violently over inheritance. The subjugated Germanic tribes saw their chance. Led by Ardaric, king of the Gepids, a coalition rose in rebellion. In 454, at the Battle of Nidau, Hunnic forces led by Elac were decisively defeated. Elac was killed, the fragile bonds snapped. The Huns, terrorizers of Europe, scattered and faded, their power broken, their unity gone. So, was Attila a monstrous barbarian or a pragmatic ruler? The truth, he was both. He was a brutal warrior, a master of terror who razed cities. He came from a harsh nomadic culture where raiding and violence decided power. To his victims, he was a demon in human form. His ambition for wealth and dominance and his single-minded pursuit left burned cities and deep trauma. Yet his genius cannot be ignored. He was a brilliant strategist, a master diplomat. He ruled a complex, multi-ethnic confederation, managing chieftains with reward and with intimidation. He understood the power of myth, the mechanics of diplomacy, the art of psychological warfare. He was shaped by his time, a king who built an empire of fear and of personal loyalty. When he died, the empire died with him. What remained was the legend. Attila lived in fear and built a legacy in memory, a name that, even after 15 centuries, still has the power to make the world hold its breath. If Attila's unstoppable rise fascinated you, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more legendary history, and join me on the next journey into the world's most extraordinary warriors.